Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. This is the follow-up from the middle, bringing more of your voices into the conversation each week. And today we are following up on our show asking what should be done about homelessness in America. And my guest is Marisa Kendall, who's a homelessness reporter for CalMatters, has been covering this issue across California, which has been at the center of the homelessness conversation in America. Marisa, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I know you cover this issue primarily in California, where it turns out 8 of the top 25 cities when it comes to the homeless population in the United States are. Why do you think this issue has been particularly difficult to deal with in California? Or is California in a different situation than other states?
Based on what all the experts I've spoken to have said, the main driving factor here is our cost of housing. There's, a lot of factors go into why our housing prices are so high, how desirable it is to live here, the jobs that are created here, and also just the lack of housing, the shortage of new homes and some delays in building that lead to that.
So just the cost of living in California has made the problem a lot worse. And yet, California has spent tens of billions of dollars over the last many years to try to deal with homelessness. Are they making a difference in their efforts?
Actually, a little bit. Last year, based on the federal point in time count, we saw a 3% drop in homelessness. So a small drop, but the first drop we've seen in a while. So, people I've spoken to have said that kind of shows that all of the money that the state has been putting into the problem over the past couple of years is finally starting to pay off.
And what are they doing with that money?
Yeah, so a lot of that's going towards housing, towards permanent supportive housing, which is long-term housing for people who are homeless that offers support like, mental health services, addiction treatment, connection to medical services if people need that. And people only have to pay a third of whatever income they have, whether it's Social Security, disability, whatever they have. There's also been some other programs that Governor Newsom has put into place. He started the Home Key program, which uses state funds to help cities and counties buy hotels and motels and turn them into permanent housing. He's put a lot of money into cleaning up encampments and trying to move those people into different housing programs, a lot of things like that.
And yet there are still many encampments around I'm in Los Angeles right now. There are many encampments in downtown LA in particular, but have they made progress in clearing the encampments, or is that going to be something that will just always be there?
Yeah, it's a little bit twofold because on one hand, you have all this money going into housing. The other thing that's really changed in California recently is there has been a significant crackdown on encampments. There was a Supreme Court ruling recently that gave cities greater leeway to clear encampments. And after that passed, a lot of cities in California really ramped up the enforcement side. They started issuing more tickets and citations, even arresting people for illegal camping or other, homeless related crimes. Some cities put in new ordinances that made it illegal to camp. And what that's done in a lot of places, like San Francisco, for example, that has really led to a reduction in the amount of noticeable encampments. Now, that's not necessarily getting people indoors and making it so they're not homeless, but what you do see is because people can no longer have tents, they're moving around a lot more. They're maybe just sleeping on a piece of cardboard, and then in the morning, they pack up that cardboard, and then they just wander the streets all day. So you don't see those big tent encampments anymore.
I remember covering this issue many, many years ago in New York City, and they had just implemented a policy where they would buy homeless people a one-way ticket to anywhere that they wanted to go, basically where they had family or a support system. But it was like, let's just move the problem somewhere else. When you talk about moving the encampments, it kind of reminds me of that. Like, okay, well, we don't want to have any homeless people here, but maybe they could be over there, but they're going to be somewhere.
Absolutely. And that's what I see a lot when I talk to people who are, subject to that. They're saying, they tell us we can't be here. So we pick up and we move across the street, and then we come back and we just move block to block to block. What the cities who are doing this, what they want to happen is they want this to pressure people to come indoors. Which, one problem with that is that only works if there are enough spaces for people to come indoors, if there are enough shelter beds or tiny homes or permanent housing slots.
Right.
So yeah, that often does just succeed in moving people from here to there.
Well, we heard from a number of people who had been unhoused in their lives when we did our live call-in program, one of whom, by the way, said that she didn't feel comfortable going into some of the shelters. That's one of the reasons why she stayed on the streets. But listen to this call that we got on our voicemail.
Hi, this is Kat from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm calling because I'm homeless in Phoenix. I've been here for 10 years in a vehicle. To help the homeless, maybe they should stop making all the laws to make it illegal to be homeless. The discrimination is awful. The way you're treated is awful. And pretty much they just want everyone to become a felon so that they can't vote or have any chance of ever getting housing. It's awful. Luckily, I'm 57 years old and probably won't make it too many more summers. Then I won't be a problem for them anymore. So they need compassion, but they don't even know what that word is. But maybe just to leave us alone in the legal system, which is terrible.
Wow. What do you think about that? What she said there, Marisa?
Yeah, I run into people all the time as I'm on the streets reporting who say things like that. It can be really traumatic in a lot of ways to be on the street and be, moved around a lot, be hassled by the police, be threatened with arrest. On one hand, you lose a lot of important personal belongings in each sweep. I've seen people lose, their ID and the documents they need to get into housing, lose medications, lose the jackets and the tarps that keep them safe in the rain. Even a surprising number of people lose the ashes of their loved ones that they've been keeping. And then they also get disconnected from maybe the supports. Maybe their social worker knew where their encampment was and was coming to them and helping them. Now they've moved. Now the social worker doesn't know where they are. It also causes a lot of, mental anguish. Just that can cause a lot of trauma, just having to relocate a lot, and also that feeling that nobody wants you there. And then the last thing I'll say about that is, some people are trying to work a job while living on the street, or they're trying to look for a job. But if they have to leave work at a moment's notice because the police are threatening to take away their encampment and destroy all their things, that's really going to get in the way of them, trying to kind of get on the right path.
You say that you speak to people who are homeless when you're doing your reporting. Do city leaders, do state leaders, do they actually take into account the views of the homeless when they're making policy?
That's a great question. They say they do. You see photo ops sometimes of them out at encampments talking to people. I know sometimes unhoused people will come to city hall meetings if they, sometimes they'll get organized in a group and come and speak their mind at city hall meetings. But I think the voice that's louder in a politician's ear is housed people who are really fed up with seeing encampments, and they're complaining. Sometimes rightfully so. It can be really tough on a small business, for example, to have an encampment at its doorstep where parents are worried about their kids walking through a camp where there might be dogs or, people doing different things. And I think that voice is really loud in politicians' ears right now.
Right. And I hear that too from people who say, don't we deserve to be able to walk through a downtown area in a safe way and not worry that somebody's going to attack us, or somebody who's, high on drugs is going to do something that's not right in a public space right now.
Exactly.
Let's listen to another voicemail. This call came in from Los Angeles.
Hi, my name is Ali. I'm calling from Los Angeles. As a business owner, I'm really tired and fed up with it and feel like more needs to be done. I think one issue that should really be considered would be just shipping homeless individuals to suburbs or cities or areas where housing is much less expensive, where it can be easier to give them the resources that they need. Because end of the day, large cities like Los Angeles, New York are super, super expensive, and I don't think it's realistic to expect that enough housing can be established to meet all their needs.
It kind of gets to a point that you made earlier on, which is that it's just so expensive in California. That's one of the reasons why the homelessness problem is so bad. But the idea of just, okay, let's ship people to places where it's cheaper. What do you think?
Yeah, this is something that comes up a lot. I hear this a lot. Either why can't they just move or be shipped to somewhere cheaper, or why can't we just ship everyone to one giant homeless shelter we've built in the middle of nowhere? And I think a big problem with that is, no human, including a homeless human, lives in a void, right? We're not just these little floating things that have no connections and no history and no backstory and no community. So I think people underestimate how hard it is to just be uprooted from everything you know and put somewhere else, right? Because even if you're homeless, you have a community where you live, you have resources, you have maybe your doctor, you have your friends, or maybe your family that can help you. Maybe you do have a job, maybe you have your kids there. There's probably a lot of reasons you can't just up and leave. And if no one's offering to pay for that, moving's really expensive also.
Well, also the person could be newly homeless. We maybe some people look at somebody who's out on the street and think, oh, this person's been homeless their whole life. But no, it could have been, 1 year ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, whatever. Something got really bad in their life, and that's where they ended up. Reminder for people who are not already following us on Substack, we're at listentothemiddle.substack.com. We're going to be back in a minute with CalMatters homelessness reporter Marisa Kendall.
With the all-new Dynasty Blueprint in EA Sports College Football 27, you can build your program by earning Dynasty points to spend on NIL, staff, and more. But the fun doesn't end at graduation. With the EA Sports MVP Bundle, get College Football 27, Madden NFL 27, plus Deluxe Edition rewards in both games. Make your rise with the MVP Bundle, available now at EA.com. Rated E for everyone with mild lyrics, easier to interact, and in-game purchases. Includes random items. Conditions and restrictions apply. See the link for more info.
Welcome back to the follow-up. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'm joined by Marisa Kendall, who covers homelessness for CalMatters. Is there anywhere in America, Marisa, where people agree that homelessness is really getting a lot better right now and they're doing something really great in this place?
So one thing that's getting a lot of attention right now is prevention, right? So people are starting to really realize that it's a lot cheaper and easier to prevent someone from becoming homeless than it is to get them off the street once they land on the street, right? So in Santa Clara County, for example, where San Jose is, they're doing this big prevention program, and they've found that if they give people basically cash to help them, maybe they're behind on rent or they need to fix their car so they can get to work so they can make the rent so they won't lose their house. It takes an average of $6,500 to prevent someone from losing their home. And you compare that to in San Francisco, it costs an average of $46,000 to keep one person in a homeless shelter for a year. So it's significantly cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's also more humane, right? It just saves that person all the trauma of losing their housing and ending up on the street. So that's getting a lot more attention. Those programs are sort of spreading throughout California. There's also the same group that started that in Santa Clara County is doing a nationwide pilot now. So they picked a few other cities across the country, and they're trying to see if it's going to work there as well.
Why do you think that this issue has gotten so political as it has? I mean, we just saw in the Los Angeles mayor's race, this has been one of the huge topics and almost put Spencer Pratt, the former reality TV star, into the final two for the general election. He didn't win, but just barely lost. And a lot of his campaign was about homelessness.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting issues because unlike it's such an emotional issue, right? Almost more so than a lot of the other campaign issues that people talk about, right? You think about homelessness and, we have statistics and we have numbers and we have things that experts say are working and we have proven solutions. But when people come at it, they generally come at it from how they feel instead of necessarily looking at the numbers. And because of that, it's also really easy to blame different people for homelessness, right? And that's what makes it so political. People are blaming our governor, Gavin Newsom, when he runs for president. That's going to follow him. People are going to blame him for the homelessness crisis in California. Like you said, people are blaming different people in LA. So it's become such a heated, emotional situation.
Let's get to another voicemail. Listen to this.
The one idea that no one has stated that I think is the most important is love. The homeless need love. Yes, they're addicted or they may have illnesses, but for them to want to better themselves, they need to choose. And for them to want to choose to better themselves, they need to feel love. And by giving them a house, if they're ill, they're not going to know how to take care of it. They need someone to give them love and kindness and prayer and get them medically well, then worry about housing, because you can't have a home if the foundation is broken.
Marisa, what do you think about that? That maybe everyone needs to have a bit more compassion for the homeless in this country.
That's such an interesting point, and I think it's something that gets overlooked. I just wrote a story for CalMatters that I thought was so interesting about providers giving people therapy on the street. And it really came from a similar place. And it was all about how, the vast majority of unhoused people on the street that these providers I spoke to run into are suffering from things like depression or anxiety or PTSD, just because of all the hardships they've experienced in their life. And so what these street therapists are doing is they're going to people's tents and they're just providing an hour of sit-down therapy with people and helping them work through these issues. And they said the most important part of that is that love aspect, that connection. Often someone who's living on the street has no one to talk to. Passerbys avoid eye contact, don't want to talk to them. They're made to feel like they are not wanted anywhere. So having this therapist or social worker sit down with them and just connect with them and make eye contact and just tell them, with their words and with their body language, you matter, you're worth it, you're important. The people I talked to said that's actually making a lot of difference in people's outlook and even helping them get housing. So it's helping them get over that depression that maybe was preventing them from going through all of the numerous steps you need to take to get off the street.
Let's get to one last caller. Listen to this.
Yes, hi, Jeremy. This is Gary from Las Vegas, Nevada. A big solution would be to reinstitutionalize homelessness. 40 years ago, we deinstitutionalized people with mental illness, basically threw them out in the streets and thought that street clinics giving them medication would solve their problem. It sounds like a nice idea, but unfortunately, the folks that are with mental illness that are a huge part of the homeless population are not responsible enough to go to those clinics, and unfortunately need to be reinstitutionalized.
So this is controversial because it is about forcing people into institutions. There's a Supreme Court case from 1975 that basically said you can't do that. But President Trump actually signed an executive order last year to move into that direction of institutionalizing, quote, individuals with mental illness who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. As far as I could tell, just from looking through it, it doesn't look like anything has really happened on that front after that executive order, but you tell me.
There is a bit of a push at the, statewide and at the local level to move more in that direction. Because right now, you can do that in certain circumstances. You can put someone into a conservatorship if they're gravely disabled and they cannot care for themselves. California just passed a bill to include severe addiction in the criteria for that, along with mental illness. And California also recently created something called Care Court, which basically uses the courts to try to get people with schizophrenia and other psychotic illnesses into treatment. There's still some controversy with that. There's people on one side who say you should never use the courts to pressure anyone into treatment. You should never force people into treatment. And I've spoken with people who have been forced into treatment and said it was the most awful, traumatic thing of their lives. But then I've also spoken with a lot of family members who have a loved one, with schizophrenia or some other severe mental illness on the street who is too sick to accept treatment, doesn't admit that they're sick. And these family members, all they want is someone to force their loved one into treatment so they can get stable. So it really is a really tough situation, but obviously you have to be so careful about anything that's involuntary.
Right, right. By the way, one thing we haven't really talked about, we've sort of gone interchangeably back and forth between homelessness and unhoused. How do you feel about what's the latest thinking about the language that we use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think people have different opinions on that. Myself personally, and I've asked a lot of homeless people about this, I don't mind the word homeless. I think it's fine. I think it's accurate. I think it's descriptive. I used unhoused sometimes just to like vary it. What I don't like is people using language that takes the person out of it. So saying things like the homeless. I would rather say things like a homeless Californian, a homeless neighbor, a homeless community, something like that.
Interesting. All right. Everyone who comes on the follow-up gets to make a prediction. Marisa, it can be about anything. What's yours?
So I probably should make one about the World Cup, but I actually don't know anything about soccer.
I've been watching it. I got to tell you, I am not a soccer person. I am loving the World Cup. I have been really getting into it. I really think it's such a fun game to watch.
It's a really fun way to just like bring everyone together, you know? But instead, I'm going to predict that we will find proof of alien life in my lifetime.
What, did you just see Disclosure Day or something?
No, I'm just waiting for it. I just think that would be so cool. Or maybe in my daughter's lifetime. I have a 3-year-old daughter, so maybe that extends it a little bit.
Nice. Good. All right. Marisa Kendall, homelessness reporter for CalMatters. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thanks for listening to The Follow-Up. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next episode is coming later this week. Follow us so you don't miss it. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I will talk to you soon.